Hey Serialholics, this is Dave. Are you looking for great Serialholic swag at an affordable price? Just check out my store where you can find everything you need from sweatshirts, t-shirts, yoga pants, shorts, hats, and yes, even a mug for coffee lovers like me. Just go to Serialholic.com and click on the shopping cart so you can show your friends that you are a Serialholic. This episode of The Serialholic contains descriptions of disturbing graphic content which may be offensive to some people. Listener discretion is advised.
Number 1, I must always be ready to serve my master. I must be clean, brushed, and made up with my cell neat. Number 2, I must never speak unless spoken to. Unless in bed, I must never look my master in the eye, but must keep my eyes downcast. Number 3, I must never show my disrespect, either verbally or silent. I must never cross my arms or legs in front of my body or clench my fists, and unless eating, I must always keep my lips parted. Number 4, I must be obedient completely in all things. I must obey immediately and without question or comment. Number 5, I must always be quiet when locked in my cell. And number 6, I must remember and obey any additional rules told to me. I must understand any disobedience, any pain, trouble, or annoyance caused by me to my master will be grounds for punishment.
Serial killers.
I'm not a big serial killer, by the way. Eight people, that's nothing.
Murder.
I wouldn't let me go, no.
Because you'd kill again.
More than positive.
Mystery. I'm Dave Jari, and I am the Serialholic. The Collector. A book written in 1963 by John Fowles is about a young man named Frederick Clegg who works as a clerk in a city hall and is obsessed with collecting butterflies. He is socially inept, so making new friends or finding a love interest is next to impossible. That is, until he crosses paths with an art student named Miranda Grey. He admires her from a distance, however, as his introversion prevents him from sparking up any form of intelligible conversation. Frederick eventually comes into a substantial amount of money, quits his job as a clerk, and purchases an isolated home in the countryside. Lonely and consumed with his obsession for Miranda, Frederick decides that in order to bring her into his life, he will have to add her to his collection, with the hopes that she will fall in love with him over time. He goes through a series of preparations, and when the time is right, he kidnaps Miranda by drugging her with chloroform and he locks her in the basement of his house. When she awakens, she obviously isn't too happy with her predicament. Frederick clearly did not anticipate this reaction and vows he will not rape her, but will show her every respect, shower her with gifts, and after a month, he will let her go, under one condition: she cannot leave the basement. Miranda makes several attempts to escape, but Frederick is always there to stop her. She contemplates ways to kill him and even tries to seduce him into letting her go, to no avail. Miranda makes one final attempt at freedom, and after she is caught, she falls ill and dies. Frederick is devastated to the point he wants to end his life, but comes across a diary Miranda had written and reads countless entries of how she despises him and will never love him. Frederick comes to the realization that he is better off without Miranda and buries her in the backyard, but he still yearns for love. He decides he will kidnap another girl. The Collector has been referenced in many venues of entertainment. Stephen King refers to it in two of his books, The Dark Tower and Misery. The Fisher King, a two-part episode for the show Criminal Minds, bears resemblance to this book, and the song Prosthetics by the band Slipknot can be construed as a first-person account by Frederick himself. Of course, this is just fantasy. For the vast majority of us, the line between reality and fantasy is well defined. For the rest, their lives are clouded by it. One person in particular used the collector as a blueprint, and with the help of his ex-wife and a subservient friend, he was able to join his fantasy with reality, which he dubbed the Miranda Project. Unlike the book, though, his Mirandas would not be showered with gifts and love, but torture, rape, and murder. On June 2, 1985, police received a call for a shoplifting incident at a San Francisco hardware store. The suspect, described as an Asian male, had walked out of the store with a vice, placed it in the trunk of a car, and when confronted, took off running. When police arrived and were speaking to the store manager, another man approached them and tried explaining that it was all a misunderstanding. The Asian man assumed that he was going to pay for the vice. Police began searching the still open trunk of the Honda Prelude, where they discovered the vice, and upon further inspection, a .22 caliber pistol with a silencer. Now, the attention was on him. He provided his license, identifying himself as Robert Stapley, 26, from San Francisco. The problem was, the police were looking at a balding, portly, older man well into his 30s. Searching for other viable identification, they found a credit card belonging to a man named Randy Johnson. Police also ran the plate in the Prelude. It was registered to a man named Lonnie Bond, and the information showed the plates were for a Buick, not a Honda. The man was taken into custody for further questioning, as things weren't adding up for the police. Now they had to figure out who the car belonged to. They ran the vehicle identification number through the Department of Motor Vehicle, and it was discovered that the Prelude belonged to a man named Paul Costner. Police now had a mystery man with a stolen license, stolen credit card, stolen plates, and a stolen car, along with a pistol with an attached silencer. Police began to question the man, and he denied any wrongdoing. Finally, he agreed to write a statement, but first he wanted a glass of water. An officer returned with the water and left the room as detectives were trying to track the whereabouts of Stapley, Johnson, Bond, and Costner. Shortly after, the man was found convulsing on the floor. He was transferred to the hospital and died 4 days later. Fingerprints discovered that his real name was Leonard Lake, and his Asian accomplice, who would flee for Canada and would eventually be involved in the longest and most expensive criminal trial ever in the state of California, was named Charles Ng. Leonard Lake was born in San Francisco, California in October of 1945. When he turned 6, his parents divorced, and he and his sisters and brother were sent to live with their grandparents. Lake developed perverse sexual fantasies and an obsession for pornography at a young age. Although I can't find any evidence stating this, one has to presume that Lake suffered from molestation, as children don't typically develop this type of perverse fantasy so early in life. The next part will enforce my presumption. Seeing that Lake had this interest, his grandmother would encourage Lake to take photos of his sisters in the nude. He would later use these photos to blackmail his sisters to perform sexual acts on him. If this type of behavior wasn't abnormal enough, Lake would collect mice, place them in acid, and watch them die. When he graduated high school in 1966, Lake joined the Marines and would serve 2 tours in Vietnam as a non-combat radio operator, and would be diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder after having a delusional breakdown in Da Nang. He would be given psychiatric treatment for 2 years at Camp Pendleton and received a medical discharge. Upon his release, he enrolled at San Jose State University, but only stayed for 1 semester after he found refuge amongst the hippie community in San Francisco. He was briefly married in 1975, but the marriage dissolved after his wife found out he was directing and appearing in low-budget bonded pornography that included the use of shackles, handcuffs, and leather straps. Lake then moved to a commune in Northern California for 8 years where he would openly speak and act upon his sadistic sexual fantasies. This is where he met his second wife in 1981, Clara Lynn Belaise, who went by the name of Cricket. She was into this lifestyle as well. More sexually adventurous than he, she would take part in role-playing fantasies and even appeared in many of his bondage films, as well as participating in polygamous relationships. Their marriage wouldn't last, however. Cricket was dominant in the bedroom, grew tired of Lake's lack of confidence, and she wanted to participate in free love. Though they divorced, they would remain very close, as you will hear later on. Charles Ng, born in British Hong Kong in 1960, was severely disciplined and abused by his father. He would tell Ng that he loved him as he was being beaten, which left a psychological impression on Ng that tied both love and punishment together. He was a loner growing up and found it difficult to make friends as he would delve into violent behavior, martial arts, and set fires to cars and schools. When Ng was 15, he was sent to a boarding school in England after being arrested for shoplifting. He would last only a semester as he was caught stealing from other students. He would briefly return to Hong Kong before being granted a student visa to attend school in the United States. He studied biology at the College of Notre Dame in California until he was involved in a hit-and-run accident. To avoid prosecution, he went to enlist in the Marine Corps but didn't have the appropriate paperwork. To much debate, it is speculated that his recruiter had forged the papers so he could enlist. Ng yearned for a place to fit in, and he tried to find that with the Marines, but he was a problem from the start. He would regularly ignore commands from his officers and would tell people he was a ninja warrior who will kill anyone within an instant. His past as a thief didn't stay dormant for long either. In 1979, he stole high-powered military weapons, including 3 automatic machine guns, 7 revolvers, a night-sighting scope, and 3 grenade launchers. As expected, Ng was arrested in order to speak to a psychologist prior to trial. In his sessions, he would brag about being an assassin, poisoning the salt shakers on base, and even claimed to fire a grenade launcher at a sergeant, but it had jammed. Fearing he would be convicted, he deserted the military. It was around this time that Ng was flipping through a survivalist magazine when he saw an ad placed by Leonard Lake. They communicated for some time and discovered that they both shared beliefs in doomsday theories, nuclear war, and the survivalist lifestyle. For Ng, Lake was the father figure that he so desperately missed from his childhood. He wouldn't find a loving bond, however, as Lake would encourage his deviant side. They talked in depth about building a survivalist commune in which there would be a fallout bunker. Upon Ng's desertion in 1981, he would travel to Leonard and Cricket's farm that cemented a dangerous and lethal relationship. Aside from pornography, Lake and Ng had a hobby of collecting fully automatic weapons, and they didn't care how they got a hold of them. In 1982, the FBI arrested both Lake and Ng on weapons charges. Lake paid the $6,000 bail, and Ng was sentenced to Leavenworth Prison for 3 years. Lake and Cricket fled to a remote ranch owned by her parents in Wilseyville, California. It was to be their retirement home, but Lake and Cricket quickly made it their own. Lake, failing to appear in court for his weapons arrest, began to feel the heat. He needed to do something in order to continue evading the authorities. He would call upon his brother, Donald Lake, and Donald's best friend, Charlie Gunner, but not in the way you would expect. Donald and Charlie were last seen by Lake's mother in July of 1983. It is believed Lake killed his brother in order to collect on his wealth, and he killed Gunner to steal his identity. From here on out, Lake would now be known to those around him as Charlie Gunner, and he would begin to build his bunker with the money he stole from his brother. Construction began upon the release of Ng. He joined Lake and Cricket on their ranch and quickly became entangled in their sexual relationship as Cricket would swap between the two. Not long after, Lake and Cricket split, and as stated before, they would remain close and remain living together. The bunker, originally planned as a fallout shelter, soon became known as the dungeon, as Lake would dive deeper into brutal sexual fantasy as he recalled the book he had read years before, The Collector. He and Eng devised a plan for the Miranda Project, but first, they would need a way to document their project. In July of 1984, Harvey Dubs placed an ad in a newspaper to lease out his video equipment. On the 25th, Harvey, his wife Debbie, and their 18-month-old son Sean went missing along with their video equipment. Lake and Eng used their video camera to record their deaths, but first, Harvey and young Sean were forced to witness the rape and murder of Debbie, who was tortured so brutally she died during her rape. It is believed Eng took Sean and placed him into a lobster pot filled with water and boiled the boy while still alive inside of a stove.
This is a cartoon that shows an Asian individual, and he has a child by the legs, and it appears that what he's doing is he's cooking this child.
Harvey was then murdered, and all three were buried in the backyard. Lake would describe his intentions of the Miranda Project on the very video camera he stole from the Dubs.
Good evening. It's a Sunday in October, very close to my 38th birthday. And I'm starting this tape without script or without any real organization of what I want to say. But I do feel a need to explain. What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life. Slave, there's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave, but nonetheless a physical slave as well.
Kathleen Allen was an 18-year-old high school student who was working part-time in a supermarket. How she came to cross paths with Lake and Eng was through her boyfriend, Mike Carroll. Carroll and Eng were in Leavenworth together, and since his release, he conspired with Lake and Eng on several shady deals. Carroll was also into torture, sadistic sexual fantasies, and he found pleasure in watching people die. It is believed that he was present during the Dubs family murder, although he didn't participate. He just watched. Kathleen was lured to the ranch after receiving a phone call that Mike had been shot and needed help. Mike was already dead, though, by the hands of Lake and Eng. She would soon find herself in front of the camera.
If you go along with this, cooperate with this, we'll be as nice as we can to you within the limits of keeping you prisoner. If you don't go along with this, we'll probably take you into bed, tie you down, rape you, shoot you and dry you. Sorry, lady. Hands up. Make your choice.
I want to be available.
Tell me when you're here. While you're here, we'll keep you busy. You'll wash for us, you'll clean for us, cook for us, you'll for us. That's your choice in a nutshell. It's not much of a choice. Unless you've got a death wish.
Lake would tell her that he would put a bullet through her head, just like Mike, if she didn't willingly participate in an orgy. Eventually, Lake grew tired of Kathleen, and rather than put her away, they killed her. Meanwhile, Lake's neighbors were growing wary on him, especially Brenda O'Connor and her husband Lonnie. Brenda had a feeling some strange happenings were occurring and expressed her concern to Lonnie that she believed she saw Lake dragging a body across the property. She also complained that Lake and Eng would follow her, which made her extremely uncomfortable. Lonnie asked his friend, Robin Stapley, to come stay with them for a while for added protection. It all came to a head one day in May of 1985, when Lake was caught staring at Brenda and Lonnie and Robin confronted him. A huge blowout ensued, but Robin pulled Lonnie away before it escalated further. That night was the last time anyone saw Robin, Brenda, Lonnie, and their infant son Lonnie Jr. alive. As with the Dubs family, Robin, Lonnie, and Lonnie Jr. were forced to watch the rape and torture of Brenda before being dragged to another room and eventually murdered. They led Brenda to believe that they were still alive.
Why are you doing this?
Because we hate you. Your baby is going to be taken away. Excuse me.
You ain't going to be taken away.
There's a family down in Fresno that doesn't have a baby.
You're not taking my baby.
The baby's dead, right?
They got one now. That's my baby.
Brenda, her baby is sound asleep, like a rock. We don't like you, but I'd like me to put it in writing.
After being raped repeatedly for a number of days, Brenda suffered the same fate as Kathleen. This all brings us to that day on June 2nd, when everything fell apart for Lake and Eng at the hardware store. As you recall, Eng fled the scene, and Lake was found convulsing on the floor. As he promised in one of his videos, Lake would never be taken alive. He had a cyanide pill sewn into the sleeve of his shirt. When the officer brought him the glass of water and left the room, Lake swallowed the cyanide. Through their subsequent investigation, police learned of the real horror that had been created by the hands of Lake and Eng. 39-year-old Paul Costner was last seen going on a test ride in his Honda Prelude with a large man fitting the description of Lake. 34-year-old Randy Johnson was last known to be visiting him in order to sell his van. Donald Giuletti, 38, a popular San Francisco disc jockey, answered an ad in a sex tabloid. His roommate positively identified Eng as the person Donald met that night. Clifford Peranto, 24, vanished after winning $400 in a Super Bowl pool from a bar frequented by Lake and Eng. 25-year-old Jeff Gerald, a drummer with a traveling band, made the mistake of helping Eng move furniture, never to be seen again. There was also 26-year-old Cheryl Okoro and 38-year-old Maurice Wack, both residents of the Pink Palace rooming house. They received an invitation to visit the farm and then vanished. The list goes on. After searching the property and viewing the videotapes, which included several males and females of all ages, bound and forced to watch orgies and rapes before being raped themselves, it is believed that the aftershock of Lake and Eng's rampage could possibly exceed 25 people, as more than 40 pounds of bone fragments were recovered from the property. Remember Cricket? Where was she when all this was happening? She was right there, a willing participant. The scary thing is that she worked at a school and was on one of Lake's videotapes describing how she fantasizes about 15-year-old girls and would like to see them raped. It is believed she lured girls from the school and neighborhood to their ranch for Lake and Eng to rape. Seized photos from the property show girls ranging in age from 12 to early 20s, naked, bound, and gagged. Young girls withering on the floor, humiliated in front of other male and female captives. This was believed to be the work of Cricket. However, the state of California knew they were going to be overwhelmed with this investigation, so they offered Cricket immunity for her cooperation. She never saw a day of prison. As for Eng, he ran off to Canada until once again he was arrested by authorities for shoplifting in 1985. It wouldn't be until 1991 when the Canadian Supreme Court would allow Eng to be extradited back to California to face his crimes. After years of legal haggling, his trial finally began in 1998, and in August of that year, he was found guilty for all but one of the 12 murders he was charged with. He is currently sitting on death row, but because the governor of California indefinitely placed a stay on execution for all death row inmates, Eng may never have his date with the needle. Oh, and that vice that Charles Eng tried to steal? He was taking that for a torture device. This episode of The Serialholic was written and produced by me, Dave Jari. Please follow me at theserialholic.com, where you can read my profile, connect with me on Facebook and Instagram, and chat with me on Messenger. Don't forget to visit my store. Just click on the shopping cart. As always, stay tuned for more episodes, and thank you for listening.